Gillian Brookes, thank you so much for joining me on Leading Through Challenge. What did we talk about today?
Okay, so thank you, Chris. Today we talked about the power of flexible working and how that's more important than ever at the moment during this COVID-19 pandemic response, that we're forced into a remote working situation for so many people. And we've talked about what we can learn from that to move outside of our reactive mindset and into more of a creative, experimental learning and growth mindset.
Gillian Brookes, welcome to Leading Through Challenge. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. In a nutshell, who is Gillian Brookes?
So in a nutshell, I would describe myself as two professional roles, I guess. There's, on the one hand, I'm the founder and director of My Kids Village, which helps primarily working parents find childcare across New Zealand. And then my other professional role is I run a consultancy business, mainly supporting businesses to become more flexible in their work practice. And obviously those two things have deep connections with each other.
And is that the area of leadership that you're most excited by as well?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm interested in helping organisations try to find ways to become more flexible. So kind of testing and learning as they go, and being willing to give things a try and say, look, we're not quite sure what's going to work. Come with us on this journey. That's kind of one of the philosophies I bring to the work I do.
Cool. So there's really a lot of the stuff that you do around flexibility. I'm going to flip it a little bit actually, because I'm sure you've got heaps of positives about flexibility, but why is rigidity potentially a bad thing for businesses and organizations?
Well, I think, a certain amount of structure is helpful. Certainty can be a very useful thing, and it's a very necessary thing. So it's not like everything needs to be flexible all the time. But if there's too much rigidity, as you say, it can really shut down opportunities, particularly in businesses for higher productivity. And I don't understand as a business leader why you would do that, why you would cut off opportunities to increase the amount of work you can do in the time available. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the people benefits. So aside from the business benefits, having a value position to your employees of current and future, to be able to say, hey, come and work with us, we help you explore ways to manage all the important things in your life, including work, including non-work stuff that's important to you. And that's a fantastic message to put out in the labour market. So it's a bit of a win-win for so many businesses that do this well.
And for the businesses that do it well, what do you see the benefits for them from a business perspective, but also a workforce perspective?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it is the first one that many talk about, many cite is the productivity gains that businesses enjoy from stronger flexibility in their workplaces. They also enjoy those staff benefits of higher engagement with their staff, lower turnover. The wellbeing economics literature shows that actually people's well-being increases when they're able to manage all the important things in their lives in a more autonomous way. So those broader wellbeing benefits that are being studied more and more, particularly now, all link back to flexibility as well. So I think that there's some really important points. And then there's the flow-on effect into if you're keeping your people because they like what get with you, then you're not spending time recruiting and training and all those things that come with higher turnover rates in your staff.
Yeah, and also the financial implications of that as well, that the costs of onboarding someone new, and whereas actually you, instead of doing that, you could spend the money on developing the current staff that you have as well and improve their skill set. Yeah, cool. We're in a really unique position at the moment here in New Zealand with COVID-19. We're currently in lockdown, and really we're almost in an enforced let's be flexible with our work practices time frame at the moment. So how can we incorporate flexible work practices into our day-to-day businesses or into our teams? and how can we think about having flexible work practices in the current environment?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's a very timely one, and one that I'm working on a lot with various organisations at the moment. I think there's a couple of things really. The first thing is that I'm talking to all my clients about resetting some boundaries, and actually there's a fantastic opportunity here to where there's everybody's whole lives are all inside their homes, their work, their home life, their family life, everything. And so one of the things that I think is more important than ever is that people acknowledge that they have to create boundaries where perhaps they didn't need those, they were a bit more obvious before. And I think that's a great lesson that you can take into the flexible work when we move beyond this COVID-19 response, is actually people need to be able to create a sense of being able to manage all the different parts of their life and create those boundaries around work and around family and around other things that are important to them. And so employers need to be open to that. And actually, the good news is that we've got research and studies that show the more autonomy you can give your people in the way that they work, the more likely it is you'll get a productivity boost from them, because people know how they work best, and they're able to then make great decisions. So long as they're in that high trust environment with you as an employer, they'll make a great choice, and you can then get the benefit from the flexibility that is on offer right now, even though that can feel a bit restrained. And everyone wins, because not only do you get a higher productivity level, but also the person who's working for you gets to balance all of those different life priorities.
And like from a practical sense, how can we manage that while still trying to run a team or run an organisation? Because obviously we're wanting to still keep things going in some capacity at the moment, whilst also respecting that those aspects of people's lives and kind of how different it is at the moment.
Well, there's a really useful experiment that Stanford University did with an organisation called Seed Trip, and we found in that experiment that even when people are forced to remote work and no choice involved, they get an improvement in productivity. And then when they turned it into their business as usual practice, they enable people to make their own choices about how they work best. So there wasn't enforcement, and they had another leap in productivity, almost double what they had in the controlled experiment. So they went from 13.5% productivity gain to about 24% productivity gain. So the lesson for us at the moment is that people make great decisions about how to work most productively if we give them the space to do that. And so often I hear from clients I work with, particularly the managers, is the anxiety over trust. How can I trust that if I can't see my people, they're working and doing what I need them to do? Well, actually, by and large, you can. And most of the time, people will make fantastic decisions, and they will surprise you about what's possible in a shorter amount of time that you just wouldn't have expected otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of one of the answers to that question is you can measure the outputs and measure what's coming out of them, and whether they're sitting at a desk for 8 hours to do that, or whether they fit it in 3 hours in between a couple of other things that they have to do at home is hopefully it doesn't make any difference to the quality of the output, but it's probably not that hard to measure, is it?
No, and I think that's one of the things I advocate a lot in the work I do is how do we shift away from inputs focused and measuring inputs, which is hours worked and those sorts of things which we traditionally focused on, into an outputs focus. Because actually, why do we care if someone's sat slaving away for 8 hours when they can get the same quality, the same output in less time, and enable that person to balance all the other stuff that they've got going on?
And I'm just going to put my physiotherapy hat on for a second there as well. Having someone sit at a desk for 8 hours is not ideal in terms of the productivity and what that does to their body. So Yeah, different ways are awesome from that physical perspective as well. We're, like,
Absolutely.
as we said, we're in a really unique situation at the moment with this kind of enforced flexible work practices. Things are going to change, though. We're going to come out of lockdown at some point in the future, and things are going to shift back towards the way that they were prior to going into lockdown and having COVID-19 come at us. How can we ensure that we retain the good elements of the flexibility that we're developing at the moment into our work practices when things do start to drift back towards that normal in parentheses?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question, and one that I've done a lot of thinking about, and one that I've discussed with several clients of mine. I actually wrote a blog on it recently called Digging for Gold, which is exactly that kind of, how do we keep a learning mindset at the moment when we're in such a reactive state of mind? I think if you can kind of start asking questions, that for me is the turning point. And there will be things that you can, in a light touch way, measure and capture some data so that you can learn. I've seen quite a few articles talking about the post-traumatic growth concept. And actually, wouldn't that be great if organisations were able to capture some data now, either analyse it in the moment or after the event when we've got a bit more headspace, so that we can find the gold that has worked well for people, so that we don't just automatically, like a bungee rope, spring back to where we began, but actually there will be some useful things we can take away. There's kind of three main areas that I suggest people, if they're going to capture some data around productivity. So get people to self-assess, given the circumstances and the hours that they had available to work today, how productive did they feel they were? Because that will give you some signs as to whether or not you can start to shift away from that inputs focus to an outputs focus. The second one is around social connection. We know that C-TRIP study that I talked about before with the Stanford University, during the 9-month enforced remote work experiment, the biggest problem they had was people feeling isolated and that missing that social connection with their colleagues in the office. Measure that now, because that will help you determine how you change your practices to incorporate social connection into your flexible work plan. And the third thing is, ask your people about how they are managing those work and non-work priorities on a day-to-day basis, because that's the main driver for flexible work. That's what people want it for. That's why people will seek you out as an employer, because that has real value for them beyond the salary. And that's what you will be able to attract and retain more people, and the right people for the jobs that you have, if you're able to demonstrate that the people that work with you have that balance right and feel like they can bring their whole self to their work, rather than I'm only valued for this piece of me. So they're the three things.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start gathering some data, and kind of track it over the next couple of weeks or months.
That's right. And a few of the clients I'm working with are doing that now, which is really good to see.
Awesome. Gillian, specifically for like really customer facing industries, so service industries where they're having one-on-one consultations with people, how do they look to develop flexibility in their work practices as well, because they're potentially a little bit more constrained?
Yeah, there are different constraints depending on the type of work that is available to people. And I think there's a few ways of looking at that. And, it's not just flexible place that is the only thing that you can look to flex, but there's also time and days. So, some people might prefer to, kind of do part-time work or flexible hours, or work so many days, or kind of compressed hours. All those different options are available if they have to be face-to-face on a particular premises. And other ways of looking at it are actually, how can you carve up the job? Because in almost all jobs, we all have report writing to do, or some desk time that is required, regardless of, you might have 60% client facing time, but there might be another proportion of your work that doesn't require that. So how can you carve up the role to create more flexible options so that they can feel that there is some choice in how they go about doing their work?
Awesome. Yeah, really good questions to be asking. I'm going to flip it on you again a little bit, and I'm going to ask you, we've been talking about leadership and ways to lead for more flexibility and experimentation in the workplace, but can you tell me about a time that you didn't lead particularly well?
Yeah, that's a good one. In this remote work, or I think I was doing a webinar for some HR professionals the other day, and I was talking in there about when this remote work was, we were all in this pandemic response space, and my initial reaction was, oh my goodness, I'm so used to having structure to manage the chaos of my life, where getting the kids to one place and then getting to work and doing this thing and doing that thing, and it's busy and it's chaotic, but it works and it's familiar. And then all of a sudden, this kind of thought that I've got this big blob of time with no compartments attached to it anymore, that felt quite overwhelming for me. And I think if I got stuck in that mindset for too long, that's not a good place to be. It's not a healthy place to be. So for me, the way out is well, first recognizing where I'm at, and that I'm suddenly this isn't going to work. What are we going to do? Is exactly that. Start asking some questions. Well, what could this look like? How could I create some categories, and how are we going to create a sense of structure in this big blob of time? And then it started to slowly turn into more of an opportunity rather than a threat, I suppose. So that was kind of one of my most recent experiences.
Yeah, nice. Gillian, what's influenced the way that you think about leadership the most over the last kind of 1 to 2 years?
That's a good question. Obviously I'm learning a lot about not leading directly, because I'm now self-employed. So I'm now leading in a different way. So I've been thinking less about one-to-one and looking at opportunities for one-to-many kind of conversations, so I can get people thinking about the same things that I want them to start thinking about, and asking the kinds of questions that I'm posing to my clients directly. So that's one thing. I think, kind of being part of I've been part of Digby Scott's Changemakers program, and that's been such a blessing to have a group of people who are on that program together, offer that kind of, that support and challenge that comes, it's a delicate balance. But I think in that group of people, if you can have some people around you that offer that can be really powerful in terms of developing your own path. And then I think, in terms of thought leaders more broadly, that, there's the idea of being more vulnerable, being honest about what things feel like, with Brené Brown's kind of messaging there is, I quite find that quite helpful. So there's quite a few things, but there'll be some of them.
Cool. Some massive influence over the last couple of years then. And Gillian, what should leaders be doing right now, in your opinion?
Leaders right now should be recognizing what it's going to take to get them beyond that reactive mindset. It's quite addictive, that kind of feeling like you're feeding and responding and reacting. It's high adrenaline. It's rewarding for our brains to feel like I'm playing the hero, I'm doing the right thing, and follow me. It's quite a seductive idea of leadership. I think the problem with that is it can be quite alienating for people around you if they feel like they've got to follow for any length of time. We know through, Dan Pink's work, for example, on motivation, that giving people that sense of autonomy, and we've talked about that already today, is really important. So if we can get leaders to step out of that reactive mindset and that heroic model of leadership and into one of facilitator, where they facilitate conversation, where they ask questions, where they find out how they can add value to the people that they're leading, that will kind of open up the potential of the people that are around them, and they'll get even better results, even better quality output from their whole team.
Amazing. Gillian Brookes, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to talk.
Really hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Gillian Brookes all about flexible work practices. Got a couple of favours to ask for you. If you found that was helpful at all, please share it out with one of your friends that may need to hear some of those messages. And also, I want this to get in front and into people's ears as much as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is for you guys to help out and to subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, and leave a rating and review as well. That goes a long way to making this more visible and getting these conversations in front of more people. And if we can do that, then everyone's going to benefit in the long run. So thanks in advance for that, and I'll see you again soon.